you all so much for being here. My name is Carrick. I'm one of the co-stewards of Climate Futures Studio, the group behind Climate Storytelling 2075 and this exhibition. Thank you for making it out on quite a cold evening. We're really excited to have 5 of the artists that participated in this year's cohort, as well as Yessenia, to moderate this conversation. Very brief background on Climate Storytelling 2075. It's a 9-month-long fellowship for young people who want to do work in imagining more just and sustainable climate futures 50 years from today. And we go through this process once a month, meeting on Zoom, as the cohort is from all over the world, New York and LA, to the Philippines and Canada. And we have guest speakers come and talk about both art and art making, climate science and solutions, as well as the intersection of how our unique identities, our communities, our ancestral knowledge and indigenous wisdom can help shape those futures, and what we can learn by melding together science and this traditional knowledge in order to create futures that are both more reflective of our visions and ultimately more sustainable. And so this is the work you see, 20 artists and 18 works in this gallery. There was 10 artists last year, and we're excited to open up another call for proposals in about 2 weeks. And we encourage you all to apply, to get the word out, and help us continue to spread this movement. So with that, really excited to introduce Yessenia Funes. Yessenia, is it Funes or Funes?
It's Funes.
Funes. Bueno, podemos continuar después. Yessenia is an environmental journalist with over 10 years covering environment and climate. Her work has been featured in national outlets from Vox and National Geographic, and Yessenia really brings the experience of the queer child of Salvadorian immigrants to making sure that the stories of those most often left out and most often oppressed are frontlined in coverage of climate and environment. So very lucky to have Yessenia facilitating this conversation. Pass it to you, and I sit down.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Well, I first want to start by just giving the artists an opportunity to all introduce yourselves, share a little bit about the work that you have here, the medium, and really curious about that future scenario that you all were envisioning when creating it, and the reflection that you all hope the viewer takes away upon seeing your art. Maybe we'll start with Michael and make our way down. Oh, I can pass this down. Actually, so I guess we'll start with Laio. Sorry.
Hi everyone, my name is Laiyonelth. I'm an Afro-Colombian artist based in New York since 2017, on and off. And I've been partnering with Summer, who will introduce herself in a little bit, to create the structure that you see at the very entrance called the Living Thread, where we envision a fashion industry of the future that is just and free from exploitation and is regenerative for our planet.
Hi, my name is Summer Dean. I'm an environmental storyteller, educator, writer, an artist, and I worked with Laio this year to create the Living Thread. And that project is truly about working with community and imagining with community to envision a fashion industry that is truly regenerative, and a fashion industry based on community and justice. And that dome is just a place for you to kind of explore what that future fashion industry might look like, play with biomaterials and materials of the future, and to explore different fashion designers based in the Global South who are really at the receiving end of fast fashion's current waste problem. And you can see some of those designers in our exhibit over there, and they've created beautiful works.
Hey everyone, my name is Yumi Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Yumi. I'm an interdisciplinary artist who works at the intersection of climate science and visual art. My work is what I like to call the Yumiverse, and it's essentially born out of climate anxiety. So when I was asked to make work for this show, I was thinking a lot about my experience and knowledge. I was finishing grad school at Columbia University's climate school. So what I was learning was that we are going beyond a lot of our tipping points So when I was asked to project into the future, it kind of seemed really grim. So I took a moment to kind of self-reflect on this, and then I was propelled into an alternate universe where creatures that are usually ignored or kind of in the background, like fungi, insects, and plants, rise as sovereign, and they teach us about reciprocity and caring for the world around us, and that everything is relative. So my work is all the way in the back on the left, thank you. It's on the left under the black light. It's hard to miss, and it's made out of like mixed media, animation, storyboarding, things of the like. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Lovinia Reynolds. I'm a writer based here in Brooklyn. I co-wrote a story with my friend Robin Moulton, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but focused on how Black communities thrive in 2075. So we took different pieces of the story. I kind of wrote about an ancestor, future ancestor named Ami, who was a professor of ecology, and found a piece of fungi that could help create a global mutual aid network. Robin wrote about Quentin, Ami's descendant, who rediscovers this network and is able to save his community after a bad hurricane. And I think what we wanted folks to leave with was both a sense of wonder about the future and also the idea that we keep each other safe and our communities are what make us strong.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Dudley, and I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, a composer by training and trade, and also this is my first interdisciplinary work in that I wrote a short story, so that's the main component of the work here that I did. It's called The Red Door, and along with the short story, it also has several musical tracks that serve as a companion piece. And in The Red Door, it focuses on my main character of Theo, who lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, my hometown, and works at a carbon capture plant. And so when I was conceptualizing this story, I thought about the question of what we were tasked with answering the question, what makes the future irresistible? I remember that being in our original, I think our inaugural meeting for this cohort. And I kind of thought about it a little bit differently in asking myself what makes the future feel inevitable. So I sought to create a future that I saw as being very realistic, both in terms of the triumphs and the struggles that we may come to face, and how even in 2075, 50 years from now, which really isn't that long of a time, really, how family and themes of love and happiness and purpose are probably still going to be questions and ideas that we grapple with. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. There were some really beautiful themes from what you all shared, thinking about that question of what makes the future inevitable. I think is a really powerful way of thinking about what this climate futurism can look like, right? And I just want to say, as someone who is regularly writing and producing and publishing stories into the world, it's a very brave and courageous thing what y'all have done to create art and to share it with us. And so thank you all for figuring out how to communicate climate anxiety, to wonder. It's a real gift, I think, for us to be able to see and receive all of that. I know that the program here emphasizes bridging climate science with ancestral knowledge, right, and lived experience. How do you balance both the science and the data with the cultural and ancestral wisdom in your work, especially as young Black and brown artists? Sorry.
I'm shy, so please bear with me. So I think when we were conceptualizing our piece, we really wanted to celebrate the knowledge that Indigenous communities and Black communities have had throughout history. For the Living Thread, we wanted to celebrate this philosophy of the 7th generation principle, thinking of how we can create a future where people get to enjoy the same things that we have nowadays. And so we created this dome that has 7 7 layers to talk about that, as an idea that like everything has to come with the thinking that we have to think of the people that are coming after us. And we wanted to also integrate like the current data of the issues that are happening in the fashion industry, like the overproduction that is happening, waste colonialism, and all of these issues that stem from really moving away from traditional ways of production. So we wanted to also celebrate and like remind people that in order to solve the climate crisis, we have to go back to what we had before to some extent, like the way we used to look at the world, celebrating like the interconnectedness of all, and seeing each other as part of the land, and celebrating the nature that is in us as well. So that's why we wanted to create like a very communal and collaborative space, because we believe that we cannot really reach that desirable future without collaboration. I don't know if that really answered the question.
Yeah.
So we wanted to merge also like our lived experiences as 2 people from the African diaspora. Me as an immigrant coming from Latin America and being a Black person, I feel like my experience in the US played a big role because I didn't have access to overconsumption before coming here. And so I was trying to draw like some of the practices that I had back home into this project as well, like the idea of really collaborating and building community through that space. So,
Yeah, so my background is actually in climate science. That was kind of like my introduction into this whole world. I was working in a climate science lab, I think in like 2017 or 2018, and I started to just get really disenchanted with working with all of this hard data. And around the same time was when Trump took us out of the first Paris Agreement, first like climate agreement. And I felt at that time that climate scientists, our work really wasn't being valued or cared about in the sense of like mass, like the mass amounts of people. And so at that time, I realized that I wanted to do more work in storytelling and art and communications. And so I guess with this piece, that's really reflected in the sense of like the fashion industry right now, as it's currently operating, in order to meet the current 1.5 degree Paris climate agreement, it needs to slow down and reduce emissions, I think by 60%. And it's nowhere near on track to achieving those goals. Overconsumption is still rampant, overproduction is still rampant. And so with this piece, we wanted to explore what it would look like to meet that 60% carbon reduction goal. And in order to meet that, we need to slow production, we need to honor the people who are making our clothes, and we need to address like circularity. We need to start producing with the goal of making things in a circular way so that nothing gets thrown away, everything just keeps being remade in a loop. And when we think about like who is at the current receiving end of fast fashion's waste problem, it's people in West Africa. They are the receiving end of the fast fashion's current crisis. And Laio and I, like, we've been besties for a while now, and yeah, we're both like a part of the African diaspora, and our friendship is just so beautiful, and it comes with so much joy and play, and I feel like that had a big role in how we created this piece as well. And our idea for like creating a dome came from the idea that domes throughout history, throughout all cultures and all traditions, have always been a way for people to gather and educate each other, join in community, pass information down between family and friends. And so we wanted to honor that with this piece as a way to explore how fashion can reach those climate goals in the future, and how that can be done in a way that honors and empowers the people who are currently facing the brunt of fast fashion's waste problem in a way so that in the future they can be the ones leading us out of this crisis. I think we both currently see like the people in Continental Market in Ghana, for example. I see them as like climate experts in a way, because if you look at some of the work they're doing, it's just absolutely magical and incredible. The way that they're turning fast fashion waste into something beautiful and joyful, it really is a climate solution, and I hope that their work can be funded and empowered, and yeah, I think they're a part of that future.
Thank you, Summer. Just like Summer, I came into this from a climate science background, as well as a veterinary medicine background. So I'm really familiar with just species vulnerability, ecological collapse, a lot of data. But I don't really see science, like hard science, as completely polarized or different from ancestral knowledge. And I see that because, my heritage is Dominican American, so my family's from the Dominican Republic, and the Caribbean diaspora is a mix. I have European Spanish ancestry, African ancestry, indigenous, Arawak, Taino, Macoris. I'm probably missing a few because unfortunately these people no longer exist. But reflecting on this has kind of made me look back on to these traditions and how they understood the world, because they have their own intelligences. And it's very similar to me as I was reflecting on this. Science is observation, right? Repetition of cycles. And then I started to notice that, reverence and ritual is also very similar. So I just started to think about how, like, these things, they're not exactly diametrically opposed. They can work together. And so in the Yumiverse, I'm kind of trying to explore what that might look like. What might it look like to hold trees and other non-human beings? Well, I actually don't like calling them non-human. I like to call them more than human beings. What it would be like to kind of, observe, listen, reflect on these things, because before we had crude science, that's what we had. That's the basis, the root of all of our instruments, experimentations today. So that's how I'm hoping to kind of honor both ancestral wisdom, my heritage, and the climate science side of things.
Thanks. Huge pleasure to everything you said, and I also came from a climate science background, so sensing a trend. But I think I want to talk a little bit about the tradition of Black storytelling. So I'm half Caribbean, and my dad is from the United States, and I grew up reading stories like Brer Rabbit and Anansi, which are fables that kind of interweave stories of resistance and how to survive colonialism, slavery, things like that. And so there's kind of this tradition of yes, there are nuggets of truth in the story that you kind of have to parse through and figure out, but there's also this magical realism that takes place as you're reading these stories, and that was a strategy for hiding tools of resistance. And so I think in this story, yes, there's nuggets of science, like we talk about mycorrhizal fungi and the networks that they use to keep ecosystems alive, and then we kind of extrapolated that to keeping communities alive. But then there's also this myth of the women that this professor is studying, where they use the fungi as a method of communication for getting out of enslavement. And so I think that tradition and the ability of our storytelling to hold both a little bit of magic and wonder, and also fact and science, I think is a real benefit of being a BIPOC and Black storyteller, and I think one of the things I enjoy about my writing.
So I do not come from a climate science background. I'm a musician, and I went through all my degrees just studying music and researching as it related to music. However, once I was a professor for a few years before moving to the city and focusing on my artistic practice. And in that time, I recognized at least for myself, I felt like I wasn't really doing enough to address the climate crisis. I felt as though teaching classes on just purely music for music's sake, it just didn't really align with what I thought is necessary in this day and age as we face this crisis. And so I was overjoyed for this opportunity to do some research in order to find out what are some solutions to maybe encourage carbon sequestering and find ways to ameliorate the effects that we have already caused. So that's one element of my story, and what I stumbled across was the use of algae to capture carbon, which isn't necessarily scalable now, but it might be in 2075. And so that's why I decided to kind of take that and run with it. And I thought also, how do we get people to care, I guess, is kind of the question that I'm still asking, because I think that's what's going to be necessary, is to reach towards those people who think that this still doesn't affect them. I think as it relates to thinking about fast fashion, other industries, there's still value issues within a lot of these corporations, and I'm hopeful for a purpose-driven economy rather than a profit-driven economy. And so tying the science element to this element of purpose, everyone has a different sense of purpose, and for some people that might be related to their relationships. And then from that point, my story became about relationships. The character Theo and her aunt, and actually it's basically just those two characters. Yeah.
Thanks, y'all. And I do want to name, because I think that point of people not caring is an important one. And there is this myth, right, that the vast majority of folks don't care about climate change, but research shows most people do care. We just don't know that others care. We don't know what to do with that care. So the work they are doing to mobilize and inspire, I think, is one of the most powerful tools that we have to actually, again, inspire action, right, and inspire those solutions. And on that point, many of the dominant narratives we see are very dystopic, very doomist, catastrophic. I work in the media, and I think the media is a big perpetuator of this as well. How does your work push beyond those narratives to wonder, to hope, care, possibility, justice?
Yeah, so I think the approach we took with the Living Thread was one to celebrate optimism and joy and hope. We really went from that premise of the future is already here to some extent in so many other communities. I like to think, as Summer was mentioning, of the people who are working at Cantonmental Market as people who are already showing us what resilience looks like and adaptability looks like, and how we can do radical shifts. So with our project, we really wanted to celebrate that idea that the future doesn't have to be this doom, dark, place where everything is destroyed and everyone is suffering. It can be a place where it can be a future where everyone is thriving and everyone has their basic needs met and everyone is living in harmony with the planet and respecting planetary boundaries. And again, we wanted to make an emphasis that the only way to reach that future is by celebrating community, because a lot of the work that we've done as advocates for a more sustainable fashion industry comes from a place of community and conversations and interactions with people who are constantly challenging the current system. And so we really wanted to make that emphasis that the future is really communal. It's a future that is built through different perspectives and includes all of these different visions It's not like a one single vision. It requires like multiple people coming together and really putting like their vision to like melt all together, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much everything he said. When I think about the current state of fashion as it is right now, and the ways in which it's contributing to the decline of our natural abundance in our planet, I feel like the fashion industry thrives on loneliness, and it thrives on us being separated from each other. The more that we feel separated, the more that we feel lonely, the more that we feel like we need to buy more things, right? And so just like Laia was saying, like the more that we're in community, the more that we're surrounded by people that care for us and care for our shared future, the less we feel like we need to consume and buy things of cheap quality that are just gonna like degrade in a few months. And I guess, yeah, as someone who works in climate storytelling and climate education, I constantly feel this state of dread and horror like every single day, I'm sure, as most of us do. But I guess what kind of keeps me going in my work is, like I'm a descendant of slavery, and I often think about the things that my ancestors went through. Every single day was an existential crisis for them. And for me and all of us to even be here now is really just the result of imagination. Like to even think about getting yourself out of that daily state of existential dread and that daily state of enslavement. Like for us to be here is absolutely incredible. And yeah, I just think about that often when I think about my daily dread and horror. Climate change is a result of colonialism and slavery, but yeah, at the same time, like it's not the first existential crisis that we faced. Our ancestors lived through that and imagined a way out of that, which is absolutely incredible. And so I think that informed a lot of the work that we created with The Living Thread.
Something that you said, Summer, reminded me of this quote. It says, we are the wildest dreams of our ancestors. So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all of us are very familiar with the dominant narratives today. It's either technological quick fixes, or I guess we're supposed to be saved by like technological overlords or something, like Elon Musk, I don't know. In my work, I think I refuse that, where it's like the hierarchy is kind of flipped. Humans are decentered in the Yumiverse, and endangered species are the protagonist. So I guess what I hope my work can kind of open up is to be a portal to radical imagination, because it's not really in the conversation right now. And I think imagination is like probably the most necessary tool. Like the entire world around us, like the chair I'm sitting in, came from someone's mind, you know? So I think that we forget just how powerful our imagination is, and I just want people to remember to think outside of the box. And this is my way of honoring my ancestors. When I think about them, they were primarily animist. Animism is this worldview where the entire world around you is imbued with spirit and agency and intelligence. This chair, everything around me, the floor, the lights. At some point there was sand, crude minerals from the depths of the earth. So I'm just hoping that the Yumiverse can remind us about the places where things come from, their material history, but also our ancestry.
I think the climate crisis is also a unique opportunity to think about how we are developing regenerative economies and transforming economies that have maybe historically harmed Black and Brown communities into resources and I guess benefits for Black and brown communities. So as an example, we talk about the fossil fuel system, which yes, amidst greenhouse gas emissions, it's also contributed to really high asthma rates, it's contributed to cancer in Black and brown communities. And we're now reimagining the renewable energy system, which when built in Black and brown communities, can alleviate air pollution and deliver revenues to local cities and towns and things like that. So I think there's an opportunity here that kind of is very hopeful if we can take hold of it. And also wanted to shout out the work of the Climate Justice Alliance, which is a national group that's putting this into practice. Here in the city, New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, Uprose, El Puente, the Point CDC, please go check out their work and support them. They're actually building projects that benefit these communities and are creating a hopeful climate future for all of this. And I think, again, as Yumi mentioned, that our work as storytellers is to make that future feel tangible and close, and outline potential pathways. And even if you don't like that pathway, you start a discussion of how do we get from point A to point B? And so I think we really do play a role in trying to outline what a future could look like, and we have to be optimistic about it because we have to be imagining that for the rest of the movement and for the people we work with.
So, in my story, I would say that I engage with us getting it wrong before we get it right. Because we're going to keep getting it wrong until we get it right. And what does it even mean to get it right? So, in that way, I think that I am very optimistic for that vision of the future where we continue to try and make progress towards ameliorating some of the effects of the climate crisis. I was inspired actually by this show called Extrapolations, which is on Apple TV+. So in which case it's about like working with one of the characters in that series actually works for, I believe, a tech company that is sequencing the DNA of animals and plants, other living beings that are in danger of extinction. And so these things they're already happening, they've already happened, right? But how can we come through that experience, because we're going to have to. And I'm optimistic about that part of the light at the end of the tunnel, but while also thinking that we still have to go through it. Does that answer? Maybe it doesn't, but...
Well, that's a great way to end the question. Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael, because I do think that, COP is happening right now as we're all gathered here, and the reality is we're in 30 years, right, of these climate negotiations that have made very little slow progress, right? And to say it's a failure is perhaps unfair, but when we're all sitting here experiencing the effects of climate change in our day-to-day lives, it's probably also unfair to say that they're getting anything done, right? We're still living with fossil fuels as our primary energy source. And we do have to confront, right, the realities of what we're going to face before things get any better. I want us to think of this world, right, that y'all have all created, these futures that we're all imagining. 2075, 50 years from now, I'm going to be in my 80s. Don't want to think about that too deeply. But, what do you all see for this future? What does success look like for your work, for the planet, for, climate crisis at large and the solutions that can come out of that? And what does the ongoing work look like between now and then? I know it's a huge chunk of time and really hard to imagine that far out in terms of our own individual lives, but what does success look like for y'all with climate crisis in mind, the artworks that y'all have created?
I think for me, and through, I'm sorry if you're putting this up, and through this work, success means letting go of individualism and letting go of capitalism. It would be like a complete overturn of our economic system and the way we define success. I think 50 years from now, I hope the voices of the Global South are uplifted, celebrated, and recognized, and given the same weight that wealthier nations have, let's say. I hope nations in the Global South have more of a voice at a global stage, and there is collaboration, there is reparations, and there are resources that are allocated for the arts primarily, because I do think the arts are the pathway to transform our world. So at a personal level, I hope to have a community center. I hope to have the Living Thread to be a space where people can gather beyond just the art exhibition. And I hope the fashion industry really embraces its power as an agricultural force per se, because everything comes from the land. So I hope the fashion industry understands that through its practices, it also has the opportunity to heal ecosystems, as we always talk, and help people connect back with the lands and the ecosystems that they live in. And yeah, I hope we're all enjoying life, thriving, and celebrating the beauty and the power that there is in community. Because as you were saying, indeed, the climate crisis is a crisis of disconnection and a crisis of isolation. So I hope, coming from the Global South myself, from Colombia, where life is a little bit more communal and more community-oriented, I hope we can embrace more of that in other countries where individualism is highly celebrated.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to fashion, I always think about how right now 96% of the emissions in the fashion industry come from Scope 3 emissions, which is like material extraction. It's like literally all of the clothing is coming from the land. It's like the emissions are coming from taking those natural resources from the land, right? And so when I think about the future, I think about fashion as a climate solution. I think about fashion as actively healing the land, working with materials that benefit the ecosystem, that benefit more than just humans, thinking of ourselves as a part of the land, not separate from it. And when I start to think about that, I think of the overall concept of just the human ego itself. And when I think about my own personal work, I often think about wellness, actually, and our connection to ourselves and the earth, which is what I call the mind-body-earth connection. And so in the future, I just really hope and imagine that we are all living in an embodied state, because I truly believe when you are embodied and you're living from a place of true connection to yourself and the earth around you, you start to lose that ego. And I believe that the current economic system has not only separated ourselves from our own bodies, but separated ourselves from the ecosystems that we live in. So embodiment is something that I really think about a lot. And yeah, like Laia was saying, capitalism in and of itself, I struggle to see a future in which the current state of capitalism, as it is, brings us to a sustainable world. Right now, an ecosystem or a forest is seen as more valuable destroyed than living. So how are we going to bring ourselves to that future if ecosystems are not valued? So yeah, I always think about that.
It's difficult for me to define success in terms of the Yumiverse, and the reason I say that is because I'm still making sense of the world myself. So I'm mapping out that inner world as we speak, and just trying to develop an understanding of it. But in terms of success in 2075, I hope that the lines, or I guess duality between nature and human, or technological, are softened. And yeah, I just think that right now, it's just like Summer and Leo were saying, it's this complete disconnection and disembodiment. So I'm hoping that in this future, our perception of the world around us is more relative, and not just like in the conceptual sense, but also like in the real bodily sense. We're thinking like, oh, this tree might be my distant cousin from millions of years ago, you know? So I'm hoping that there's this kind of shift where it's like more relational, and less like extractive and exploitative. Just like Summer was saying, we look at the world around us as a resource instead of kin or family or a neighbor even. So that would be success for me in this projected future. Sometimes it feels far off, but I hope that the Yumiverse can at least very much plant that seed to start these conversations and maybe just get us to look at the world around us a little differently.
Awesome. So success, I think, well, societally would look maybe like transitioning from, as you mentioned, like an extractive economy that extracts people's labor and resources, and one that invests in our ecosystems, in our communities, in our health and our dignity. And I think we have some really good strategies that we've outlined for how to get there. We talk about land back and reparations, and investing in community-owned resources is all viable strategies that I think have been floated and are in progress, and I think just doubling down on those. I think personally, I was talking to Robin about this before this panel. I was like, I would love to be seated on my porch drinking some tea on my farm with all my friends. We own a farm, we're growing food that, feeds us and our neighbors. We generate our own energy. We have dance parties every week. Because you have to have joy. You can't do this work without, regular releases of joy. So, yeah, that's, I think, what it would look like for me.
I think success looks like changing the narrative. Right now, it feels as though the narrative surrounding climate action is like we're running out of time. And if we are more embodied and in tune with the sense of the collective, then we actually have a lot of time to ameliorate things. And paradoxically, in order to do that, I feel like it means being acutely aware of oneself. So success in the future, and like what I hope to see is a sense of humanity that we know ourselves so well that that sense of self disappears, I guess. We achieve that transcendence that it seems like we're always searching for.
Yeah, I definitely sense some themes in your answers. And what I'm hearing is like what we really need is a cultural shift, right? A shifting of worldviews from, one of moving away from the me and toward the we, right? Which especially in the global north, as you mentioned, Lyle, the global south already has a lot of that figured out. It's we here in the global north that tend to think only of ourselves, unfortunately. I hope that is the world that we see in 2075, and I'm really excited for the idea of like a community space for the living thread, and for you all to get your work published. I didn't hear y'all say that, and I would personally love to like, a graphic novel of the Lumiverse, or like a TV show of the Lumiverse, and your stories published in books. Like that is also should be part of the goal as a lover of books and words. Lastly, before we open up the panel to some questions from the audience, is there one word or a short phrase that captures how you feel now about that future that you're imagining? I know it's going to be hard, one word, one phrase, but...
I think the word I will use is optimistic. I am very optimistic about the future despite everything that is happening. I think we do have the tools and the knowledge and the people and the will to get there, so it's just a matter of continuing being optimistic. That was more than a word.
As I was saying before, I think embodiment. I think so often when we're fighting climate change and fighting for a better future, we're focused on fighting for external change, but I'm often thinking about how can we look at our inner worlds and just feel more embodied in ourselves so that we can listen to this inner wisdom that we've always had. I think within our current system, we're always forced into a state of disembodiment. We're often feeling outside of our bodies, just trying to survive. So I just imagine a future where we don't have to feel that way, and we can listen to this inner wisdom that we all have.
I think the word I would say is maybe re-enchantment. And I think about one of our fellow artist friends and cohort member, actually Mariana Castro, right here. She created like this dictionary. It's called the Caretaker's New Dictionary. And she just came up with these new words to describe, and I really think that the way we speak mirrors how we look at the world around us. So I think about the word re-enchantment because it's kind of like casting a spell, right? Very witchy. So that is what I'm thinking. Like, how can we like re-enchant people of the world around us, make them curious, just to think outside the box? I think I've said that before, but yeah.
Okay, so my word is grounded or rooted. And then Robin's phrase is only barbecue, no mildew. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, we're in like this do or die moment where you can either choose to be barbecue or you can choose to be mildew. And I was like, I still don't know what that means. But I guess the takeaway is maybe only barbecue.
I've been thinking about this since for a long time, and I still feel like I don't have an answer. But if I had to have one, maybe frenetic in the sense that as Robin was alluding to, perhaps we're very close. It feels like we're on the precipice of this shift, this maybe even like cracking or rending of ourselves in the world that we see today. And I think that is actually a very exciting time to be here. I feel very grateful to be here with all of you, to witness that and to witness one another and all living things as we engage on this journey with each other.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. I think that was a really powerful way to end the conversation. And we'd love to open up the discussion to you all, for anyone who has questions for our panelists. We will see how far this mic reaches. Otherwise, I have to project your voices. Yeah.
If you could I'll just project. All right. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of collaboration going on with what you guys are doing. You know, like you guys are partnering. Yumi, you're kind of collaborating with this like inner something. I'm sensing a lot of collaboration. So I wonder if you guys talk about maybe if there's a difference between making art as an individual versus as a collaborative.
And would you mind just maybe sharing your name with us, just so that we...
I'm Nicole. Where wants to go?
All of us. I think collaboration is very enriching. I feel like in this current moment, sometimes it's challenging as well, but it's very enriching, as I said. Like, I think collaboration is like constantly being challenged to question your own ideas and like to expand your ideas as well. So like when you're working with someone else, it's like you're constantly challenging your views and you're learning from them, and it's like a process that is reciprocal, if that's the word. Because I've learned so much from Summer, and I feel like our work has been informed through our experiences again, and it's like complementary. And at the same time, as part of the cohort, we were all collaborating because we were having these sessions every month and we had pods, and so we will hear feedback from our fellow cohort members. So it was really interesting to, like share ideas and then get feedback and then challenge yourself to think outside the box, as you were saying, and like to continue to expand our views of the world. So collaboration, I think, is essential. And I think we're always collaborating without realizing. So yeah, collaboration is the essence of life.
Yeah, I think for this project that Laio and I worked on, I could have never done this myself. Like it was meant to be collaborative. Yeah, I mean, I just love working with Laio so much. I feel like when I do things alone, it's hard for me to finish things. And Laio is a person that always reminds me that, like, you can do it, like, why don't you just finish it? And so collaboration for us is just very beautiful and very reciprocal. Yeah, it's just always really nice to have someone to remind you that you can do it. We all have that, like, inner voice inside of ourselves that tells us that, like, we can't do it, or we're not ready, or we don't have enough credentials, blah, blah, blah. So I just find, like, friendship when it comes to art, environmental storytelling, honestly anything you're doing. Just having close friends around you to support you and ground you and remind you that you're a badass is very, very essential. So, yeah.
So all of us didn't work together, like, on our projects, with the exception of Laio and Summer. But we did work together in another regard, just like the conversations we were having. We were bouncing off ideas off of one another. It's so important to have a soundboard, I feel. But it's also like, well, I think what was the most generative is that, like, there's always a blind spot that you have when you're, like, working on your own, and you know, it just takes that one person to be like, hey, have you thought about it this way? And you're like, oh wait, no, actually, I haven't. And before you know it, your work's, like, evolving. So you come in to this cohort with an idea, and then sometimes it completely changes, or it's just something more than you imagined. I did not imagine I would be painting a huge mural. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's in the back. But that was not what I was planning to do at all. So that came as a result of just having conversations with my peers. So I think it's a reminder of just, like, you know, working together is just like, there's so much more you can do beyond yourself when you collaborate. And you'll end up surprising yourself.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to what you all said. I would just say I forgot to shout out the illustrator who made some very beautiful images for the story that we wrote. Her name is Christine Piolet, and the pictures are up in the back as well.
I want to plug another member of the cohort, Rachel Kramer, who I would say was a collaborative partner of mine as we kind of workshopped our stories throughout the process. And also shout out to Lovinia for starting a writing group for in-person accountability, so getting to how I see collaboration, or, like, certain sort of themes that are important to me. Thinking about trust. And there are different levels of collaboration, right? So within any of those levels, trust is important. You're placing your trust in whomever you're collaborating with, that they're going to give you their honest opinion about your work. And also there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you're seeding when you show someone your work in its unfinished state. Like, it can be very difficult for some people. I know it is for me. So I remember some of the earlier conversations I had with Rachel. It was before we even shared our stories with one another, but we were like, oh, let's give it another week, you know? So that's something that's always, like, a really interesting part of the collaborative process. Like, once you actually first sort of just, like, bury yourself to your partners in that way. Like, it's like any other kind of relationship, I think. And so, and accountability. So the writing group was really great for accountability, I think, for both of us. And it's since continued. And so for me, like, thinking about like a next project, like, I'm in the process of starting a Substack where I'm going to write articles about storytelling and environmental disasters related to where I'm from in Ohio. And so I owe Lavinia that and this cohort, like if it wasn't for that collaborative process, bouncing like that springboard, then I wouldn't be propelled to further action.
What's the name of the Substack? Tell him.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah, it's the handle is thoughts of the title I have is thoughts of a first-time human, and it's the URL is mrdudley20.substack.com. So it's like Mr. Dudley, but I'm not a Mr. I'm a doctor.
I also just want to correct myself because I realized that Robin and Lavinia work together as a group, not just Summer and Lana. So it's definitely, if anyone's interested, you can definitely join the cohort as a group. It's been done by these lovely individuals by my side. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Would you say that you do worry for the next generation, for example, like your kids, or even if you don't have kids, like, would you say you would worry for the next generation? I know, Layo, you said you were full of optimism, but I'm so curious about that.
Whoever wants to jump in.
So I have a niece and several nephews, and it's because of them that I'm doing this, you know. So in that way, yes, I am worried, and that's okay, right? I think to not address climate-related anxiety or just anxiety in general, right, it's just not healthy, and so another experience that I'm grateful for is going to the Climate Cafe, which is, they host a lot of different events both around the city and just in different locations, at least around the United States. And there are places to talk about that with other people. So are you based in here?
No, I'm based in Paris.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you could start one there if there isn't one already. But all I'm saying is thank you for your question. Don't be afraid to ask or to tell people or to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I've expressed it already, the Yumiverse is born out of climate anxiety. However, I think that a superpower that we forget that we have is that we can transform, or energy is always able to be transformed. Any feeling you have, you can change it into anything else. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's certainly possible. But yeah, I guess just kind of what Michael was saying is that I am hopeful right now because there are plenty of people that are still right here on this panel and all around us who are, here, right? They're here, they're ready to think about different perspectives, focus on solutions, and we're full of just possibilities just coming together. And I also think having third spaces is really important. Michael shouted out the Climate Cafe, but I also want to plug the Climate Imaginarium. Some people are here, Jolly's here, Nicole Cooper's here, and there's a bunch of people floating around. Just talk to them, because I think in these communal spaces, this is where you're going to find hope, right? Just by having conversations with people. So just ask around and maybe start it up in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think when you think about it, humans have always been going through a crisis all throughout our history. The climate crisis is obviously a little bit different, but I often think about how all the solutions we need are kind of already here. We really just have a problem and a crisis of power imbalance when you think about it. Especially in the US, our political system is incredibly corrupt. We have a crisis of corporate corruption, it really just all is about power. Like, we have so many solutions. There are so many people all around the world that are creating these solutions. They're already created, they just need investment. So when I think about the future in that sense, obviously it is scary thinking about the next generation. I have a little 9-year-old sister, and I'm scared for her every single day, but it brings me a little bit of solace and hope knowing that, like, these solutions that we need are already here. We just need to, like, fight this problem of power. All these tech bros and billionaires that are holding us hostage.
Yeah, I guess to answer your question, just in echoing like all of your sentiment when you ask if I worry about the future generations, I do to some extent. I also am constantly worried about people who are already facing the climate crisis, because I think we tend to forget that the climate crisis is here and it's affecting so many people nowadays, especially in the global south. But my optimism comes from precisely the people who continue to show up and the sense of resilience that people continue to display and how people are willing to fight back. And I feel like there is this like global awakening that has been happening in the last few years, where people are precisely understanding the power that we have collectively and how we can actually change things when we come together. So I feel like it's just a matter of time until more and more and more people just say, okay, this is enough, I'm fed up, and we need a new system. And I think it's coming. It's like inevitable. So yeah, that's what gives me like the optimism, the sense of optimism. The fact that this system was never really built to last, so it will collapse soon.
With that, we are out of time. I think folks are going to be hanging around for a little while, so feel free to engage with our panelists and ask any other questions if you didn't get to ask a question here. And thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank Yessenia as well. I forgot to plug, Yessenia has a really excellent weekly creative climate newsletter called Possibilities that you all should subscribe to. The events, this one and through the end of the exhibition in February, we're trying to hold weekly or bi-weekly events. Folks with Climate Cafe, we're talking with them. We have a workshop next Friday around upcycling, sort of a buy nothing alternative to Black Friday. So either on the website, which is www.climatefutures.art, or the Instagram handle is climatefutures.art. You can follow and you'll get updates on all of it. And then the final note is this whole thing is an entirely volunteer-led, grassroots-funded effort. And some of you in the audience have really generously donated to make the gallery possible, to make programming possible. But if you have the means, you can go onto the website, climatefutures.art, and donate. And we would love to have more people get involved in the movement with your time, apply to the next cohort, just be a part of it, whether it's formally with this group or at your dinner table, at your subway stop, just having these conversations about building a better future. So thank you.
Also, I just want to shout out Eric for putting this together. Lincoln and Bobby, who are not here, but supported us throughout the past 9 months and have just been so incredible. So thank you.